Hey guys, and welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we'll be taking a look at this excellent laptop here, the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon. This is their flagship ultra portable from their business line of laptops, so there's no fancy features here, but you do get solid functionality and hardware across the board, as well as excellent engineering that make this a laptop that I can highly recommend. Before I talk about the features of this laptop, I will go through the hardware that's in my review unit here. This is an Intel Core i5-7200U processor with 8GB of RAM, a 256GB SSD, and a 1080p display. So this is the entry-level model. There are a number of configuration options available that can take you up to a Core i7 CPU. There's a 1440p display option, 1TB SSDs, and up to 16GB of memory, but of course that costs you a bit more money. There's a lot to like about the design of the ThinkPad X1 Carbon. Normally I'm a fan of the all-metal bodies that you see from things like the Apple MacBook or the HP Spectre X360, but Lenovo has used soft touch plastic around the entirety of this body that looks really decent. It's minimalist and it feels great to hold. It also has the advantage of reducing the overall weight of this laptop. It's a 14-inch laptop, but it weighs just 1.13 kilograms, which is well below the average that we see even for 13-inch laptops at the moment. This laptop won't be turning any heads thanks to its business-oriented design, but I appreciate some of the features included here, like the 180-degree hinge, which gives you the most flexibility in display positioning, and some of the subtle angles and curves around the edges help hide some of the thickness of this laptop, though it's not a particularly thick laptop in general anyway. The X1 Carbon uses perhaps the best range of ports I've seen on a laptop recently. On the left-hand side, you get two Thunderbolt 3 ports. Both of those are of course USB-C, and either of them can be used for charging. There's also a full-size USB 3.0 port, full-size HDMI, and a proprietary connector that is used with the included Ethernet dongle. Of course, Ethernet ports are simply too large to include on ultra portables like this these days, but Lenovo has compromised here by using a special full bandwidth port on this device specifically for Ethernet, and they've included the dongle in the box, which is a great inclusion to see here. There's also an additional full-size USB 3.0 port on the right-hand side, as well as the 3.5mm audio jack, and quite a significant vent for the cooling solution. Hidden away on the back edge of the laptop is a micro SD and SIM card slot. It's really nice to see both of these features included here. You can quite easily expand the storage of this laptop without having dongles or external devices hanging off all over the place, and LTE connectivity can be very handy, although this does cost extra in some regions and models of the X1 Carbon. There is a fingerprint sensor included below the keyboard on the X1 Carbon, and I really appreciate how a number of laptop manufacturers are including this security feature on their ultra portables these days. The one on the X1 Carbon it's very responsive and it works extremely well to secure your device. It's much easier than entering a PIN or password every time, and I wish more laptops had this sort of feature in it. This wouldn't be a ThinkPad laptop without the signature keyboard that has been used for generations. It's quite good on the X1 Carbon. The travel distance from each key is fantastic for an ultra portable, and this leads to great tactile feedback across the board. Most of the keys are very adequately sized, such as the modifier keys, the function keys, and even the arrow keys, and this helps make the laptop keyboard quite easy to get used to and use on a daily basis. That said, the worst feature of this entire laptop is included in the keyboard. On every keyboard ever made except for the Lenovo ThinkPad keyboard, the control key is in the bottom left-hand corner of the keyboard. Yet on this device, you'll find the function key in the bottom left-hand corner, and this makes it really hard to simply pick up this laptop and hit things like Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste without having to rewire your brain. It takes a long time getting used to this key position, and I simply wish that Lenovo would keep a traditional keyboard layout here and swap around the function and control keys to make it easier to use. Moving on to the performance here, and for the most part across these benchmarks I'll be comparing the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon to the Razer Blade Stealth. This gives us a good comparison between the Core i5-7200U and the Core i7-7500U that's found in the Blade Stealth. For the most part, the i7 is a faster processor, and this gives you a good idea of whether you should spend a bit more money on the i7 option that you'll find for the ThinkPad X1 Carbon, whether it's worth spending that extra money. Of course, you can see some other results in the charts as well to see how it performs against some other laptops on the market today. We'll start off here with the PCMark workloads, and looking at the home test, we'll see that the Core i5 CPU actually performs quite well here compared to the Blade Stealth, outperforming it by 9%. But as we move on to the creative workload, you'll see that it falls behind by 23%, and that's due to, of course, the higher clock speed provided by the Core i7 CPU and also a higher clock on the GPU as well. Surprisingly, in the work test, both the X1 Carbon and the Blade Stealth perform similarly. The Blade Stealth is a few percent faster, but for the most part, both devices give you a fantastic work experience in things like Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint, things like that, and that's a main use case for the X1 Carbon here. In Cinebench R11.5, which is one of our encoding tests, the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon is around 5% slower than the Razer Blade Stealth in both the multi-threaded and single-threaded tests. This is pretty typical thanks to the extra clock speed get from the Core i5 7500U. You'll see similar results in our X264 encoding benchmark in pass 1 of this video rendering test. The Core i5 CPU is around 11% slower than the i7 7500U, but this margin is reduced to 4% in pass 2 of the benchmark, which is a pretty decent result here. In the WinRAR compression benchmark, in our multi-threaded test here, you'll see that the Core i5 CPU is actually 12% faster, which is a bit of a surprise here. But in the single-threaded workload, it is 2% slower. So a bit of an interesting result here, but a good result for the ThinkPad X1 Carbon nonetheless. If you're wanting to run some simulations on your laptop, we can see here that in MATLAB 2016, the Core i5 CPU is 7.5% slower than the Core i7 CPU. This is a heavily single-threaded workload, so the difference in clock speeds here is quite telling, although surprisingly in the graphing benchmark, this Core i5 CPU is 19.7% faster, which surprised me a little bit, but again, a strong result for the X1 Carbon nonetheless. The ThinkPad X1 Carbon is definitely not a gaming device by any means, and you'll definitely struggle to run popular titles at any sort of reasonable frame rates, not just on this laptop, but really any ultra portable. But we can see here in the 3D Mark CloudGate workload that compared to the 7500U, there's not really a massive performance difference, and even taking a look at the Skydiver test as well, the i5 CPU in this laptop is only 4% slower than the i7 laptop in the Razer Blade Stealth. We will take a look at 2 games though, just in case you're interested. Having a look at Tomb Raider, which is an older title these days, running it at the lowest possible settings at 720p. We do exceed 60 FPS, which is a decent result, but let's be honest, I don't think too many people will really want a game at 720p on a laptop. That said, it is 15% slower than the Razer Blade Stealth in this particular benchmark. We'll also take a look at Civilization 6, and again, this game really isn't playable on the lowest settings at 1080p. It struggles to hit even just 20 or 25 frames per second average. There is one final thing that I want to look at in terms of performance, and that is SSD performance. We're looking at the 256GB NVMe PCI SSD inside this laptop, and performance across the board is very solid, with read and write sequential speeds well above 1GB per second, and also looking at the random performance, 140 megabytes per second random 4K writes and 57 megabytes per second random reads is a very good result for an ultra portable, and this leads to fantastic app loading, copying times and the like on the ThinkPad X1 Carbon, and it's great to see that they're not skimping on any sort of storage inside this device. Another excellent aspect of the ThinkPad X1 Carbon is its battery life. There's only a 57 watt-hour cell inside, which is not too large by today's standards, but it still produces really solid results in our benchmarks. Taking a look at our video playback test, which essentially just loops a video at 250 nits brightness until the laptop dies, the ThinkPad X1 Carbon achieved just over 9.5 hours, which puts it in the top end bracket of the laptops that we've tested recently. The HP Spectre X360 does outperform it slightly, but this isn't too surprising considering the Spectre X360 has a slightly smaller display and a slightly larger battery. And looking at our Wi-Fi browsing benchmark, which loops through some websites at 20-second intervals in the most popular browser of today, which is Google Chrome, at 200 nits of brightness, you can see the ThinkPad X1 Carbon actually tops the charts here with just over 7 hours of life. And this is a fantastic result for an ultra portable, and really a testament to Lenovo's quality engineering that they've put into the ThinkPad X1 Carbon. Before I jump into the conclusion, it's worth talking briefly about the display. It's a 14-inch 1080p LCD with reasonably slim bezels around the edge. That makes it not too large for a 14-inch laptop. We'll talk a bit about the color performance here by jumping straight into SpectraCal CalMan 5, where we do all of our color testing. Across our grayscale sweeps, you can see a delta E average of 3.84, which is not a fantastic result, but compared to some of the laptops you find on the market today, it's not too bad. A color temperature average across the board of 200 nits of 7181K. Not a fantastic result, but some laptops do push that well into the 7,000 or even 8,000K range. And color calibration can definitely fix both the delta E, grayscale, and color temperature average if you so desire to do that. And gamma, again, a bit disappointing at 1.977. I'd rather see this at around 2.2 as you'd expect from an sRGB calibrated display, but I don't think it affects the performance of this device too much in general. Looking at our saturation sweeps, and you can see the average delta E value of 3.82. Again, not a fantastic result, and this is largely due to the incorrect color temperature of the display, which you can see as an effect here in the chart on the right hand side. That center white dot isn't quite in the black center square, and this is dragging most of those other dots away from their respective squares. And perhaps the most disappointing result of all was in our very intensive color checker test, where we saw an average delta E value of just 4.75. Not too accurate here and not great for color accurate work. But again, most of the time you can just calibrate this display and fix a lot of these performance issues here. And again, not too bad compared to some of the other laptops that I've tested, often which can push above a delta E of 5 in some of these tests. And just before we move on, brightness is something I want to touch on. 310 nits maximum with a contrast ratio of 1396. So not too bad here in terms of brightness and contrast, and that leads to generally quite nice looking images on this display. At the end of the day, I really like the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon. I wish that Lenovo were giving me more than just a couple of weeks with this laptop. It's a fantastic device with solid hardware across the board. I was really impressed with the performance of just the Core i5 CPU inside this laptop, often matching the Core i7 CPU in competing devices at times. The design, very impressive. Love this soft touch plastic body. It reduces the weight and gives it a minimalist, business-oriented look and feel. The keyboard, generally quite good in terms of its tactile feedback and responsiveness. Not happy about the position of that function key, but I hope that Lenovo does address that in the future. And something I haven't touched on before in this review as well, the trackpad is excellent, and I love the inclusion of that little red joystick that you can use as an alternative to the trackpad at times. The display, again, very good. 14 inches, 1080p, reasonable, not terrible, not excellent color performance. You can definitely calibrate it to achieve a bit better results there. And in terms of battery life, fantastic results, topped the charts in our Wi-Fi browsing test and did very well in video playback as well from just a 57 watt-hour battery. So really the ThinkPad X1 Carbon is almost a complete package. You get great performance, great battery life, a great design, very good display, decent keyboard and trackpad, and that's exactly what you want from a laptop. It hits all the nails on the head. You do have to pay for quality though. This is an expensive laptop in the United States at $1,329, and for just a Core i5 CPU, 8GB of RAM, and a 128GB SSD, that's pretty expensive, and competing devices from HP and Dell will offer you similar hardware for a cheaper price. It's actually a bit more affordable in Australia at $1,899, again for the base model, and that comes with a higher capacity SSD at 256GB, so not too bad in Australia. A bit too expensive, I think, in the United States, but you definitely get a very high quality laptop, and it's been one of my favorite devices to review as far as ultra portables are concerned the past couple of years. It's truly an excellent device. And that's it for this review of the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon. Links to buy this laptop are in the description below. Check out the written review on techspot.com, and we'll catch you in the next one.